I'm Elizabeth Daggy-Mount. Here we're doing a session on for SCAR Speaks, and we're focusing specifically on issues of gender and conflict sponsored by the Center for the Study of Gender and Conflict. I'm here with Mark Hardy today, who's going to talk a little bit about how gender was politicized in the 2012 election and the rhetoric surrounding the war on women. So Mark, wanted to start off with a question. What has driven the construction of political rhetoric in the U.S.?
Right. So far, this paper that I wrote was written before the November 6th election. Since then, I don't think any of these issues have been resolved that we're about to discuss. So it's very important that we go into them now. And we can try to look at the similarities and differences before and after. I don't think there are any. I think it's very similar. Situations hasn't changed. But so far, I've identified three main groups, the big three, if you will. Politicians, pundits, and the general public. And they're all interdependent and interrelated within each other. They depend on products that each produces and the other one consumes. So we'll talk about that a little bit more and how that's ingrained in American politics, and has been for a while, but in the lead up to this election it has been a major issue.
So who are these big three, and how are they driving the construction of political rhetoric?
Well, they feed off of each other in a way. So politicians, they need pundits and they need the public to endorse them, to listen to what they want to say, even though politicians in their definition are civil servants. So by their job description, they need the public. Pundits are obviously shoveling out different opinions, different views, whatever they see fit, to get some airtime. And the public has a choice to either refute that and deny it, or come up with a better alternative through activism, conflict resolution, you name it. We have multiple avenues to do it. I don't think the public has been as engaged as they should have been in this past election. But what's interesting is that all three of these actors play into what Tannen would call the argument culture, and the U.S. As an argument culture is an excellent example. What I mean by argument culture is the media will portray certain political issues as warfare and use warlike imagery, rhetoric, to capture the attention of the public. You see this with, who was Todd Akin more than 3 months ago? Right. No one really knew, but he was thrust into the public spotlight because of his controversial remarks about rape. This has happened to a few other Republican legislators in the past, but they have received publicity. They haven't received a backlash. And what's important to note there is that while they have received publicity, they have gotten their names out there. They haven't received any rebuttals, rebukes, punishment morally for their stance on their ideologies on denying women certain rights. And that plays into what's ingrained within the big three within America, the gender discrimination and the institutional discrimination that makes it all possible. So I'd like to talk about how women's health legislation is not exactly an issue, but it has been created to be an issue by this institutional discrimination that's been prevalent since America has begun, in a sense.
Right, so it's not, what you're saying is it's not really about a women's issue so much as structural inequalities that disproportionately affect women?
Right.
Okay, gotcha. Now, you talked a little bit about Tannen and how his theory sets up this culture of argument. Can you talk a little bit about how this has played out in the rhetoric surrounding the 2012 election?
Yeah, so far you've had pundits that, let's say Fox News, MSNBC, both of those organizations have their own biases, and it's been proven, I guess you could say. I think we would be ignorant to deny that MSNBC and Fox have their own ulterior motives. But that being said, these pundits are not news reporters. They're not unbiased. They're not, I guess, an excellent example would be Martha Raddatz at the presidential debates. She was a moderator. She was neutral. However, pundits are paid to have their opinions and to present them to the public. What gets more airtime, though? Someone who has a very neutral comment and maybe fact-driven, or someone who has a vitriolic, almost a violent portrayal of that opinion. In America, that violence sells. If you look at certain news articles about the election and the lead-up, it would all be Mitt Romney takes a jab at President Obama, or Obama defends his stance on this issue, a certain issue. So you have this warlike imagery that the public loves to engage in.
Mm-hmm.
And so we, as members of the public, can either come up with new ways to portray our sentiments, or we can get lost in this cycle, and I think it's a very dangerous cycle to get lost into.
So how has that specifically played out around gender and women and the politicalization of gender in the 2012 election, this warlike culture?
Right. So going back to one of the big three, the politicians,
Mm-hmm.
We have the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. The Republican Party has made certain statements about rape, but there's also been a phrase that's been coined about them where there's a war on women.
Mm-hmm.
War on women's rights, war on women's health legislation issues. Also, playing off that, the Democratic side has, in my opinion, had a war for women
Mm-hmm.
through pandering, through different initiatives that have been more or less motivated to gain the votes of women.
Mm-hmm.
If you were a single white female that was 20 to 25 years old in this election, you were going to be targeted specifically because they thought that you would be an undecided voter, and therefore certain initiatives that they passed or endorsed would gain your vote. We can look at actually a few of these statements within the Republican platform and the Democratic platform. Hopefully that will bring out some examples that
Sure.
might even make this obvious. But one of the points of the 2012 Republican National Platform was, we, however, affirm the dignity of women by protecting the sanctity of human life. So, therefore...
My dignity would be compromised if someone else's life was not protected.
Right. So
I'm not sure how those issues are connected, but
Right.
we'll roll with it for the point of illustration.
Right. So viewing women as a carrier of a fetus as opposed to a human being with their own moral rights and human
Mm-hmm.
rights. Contrasting that with the Democratic point that the Affordable Care Act is ending health insurance discrimination against women and provides women with free access to preventative care. In both of these examples, you don't see women having agency within and for themselves within the system. Therefore, I think that we need to have a certain conflict resolution strategic plan designed to recognizing the agency, not so much empowering women, because I think that that's, not something that we need to do. I
Right,
think we
part
need
of
to
this
recognize
discourse, yeah.
within this structural inequality, recognize that other, 50% of the nation has agency, and they should be able to use it to actually get us out of this spiraling downward spiral.
Right. So the common point with both the Republican and the Democratic platform is that women aren't seen as actors within this. In the Republican platform, we're people that our dignity is being undermined and the sanctity of human life must be protected on our behalf, ostensibly. And then in the Democratic platform, we're seeing that our healthcare needs to be provided for.
Right.
So we're not really seeing women as actors who can protect their own dignity of life or their own dignity and ensure sanctity of life through that dignity. And with the Democratic platform, we're not able to somehow overcome the structural inequalities around the healthcare system, but instead have to be provided for. We can't be part of that debate in constructing a new system where our healthcare would be intrinsically valued as opposed to this kind of add-on legislation that needs to make sure that, yes, women will be taken care of.
Right. And to put it in context, you don't see any men's health issues in these
Mm-hmm.
platforms. People would laugh, politicians would laugh, why would we need to do that? But the simple fact is they're not included because it's assumed.
Viagra will be covered. Birth control is questionable.
Exactly. So we have that issue playing out definitely within these platforms. The rhetoric, they're very different, but we can look at that another day. I think that's a completely different topic. But for the sake of examining this institutional discrimination, we can look at gender rating in health insurance plans, where women are required to pay a higher premium because they themselves get pregnant on their own. It's their own health issue.
It's true. We impregnate ourselves frequently.
Exactly. So
Must be stopped.
Therefore, women need to pay a higher premium because they partner with a man to make a fetus, whether that fetus life starts at conception or not. That's beside the point. But women are required to pay a higher premium because of these women's health issues that are brought up even within these platforms to pander or to have a war against women. It's very interesting.
It's really interesting that both parties are making ideological points using women. It seems almost as if women are being used as a vehicle to sell particular ideas as opposed to selling ideas to women. We're selling ideas about women as a way to convey deeper political messages.
Right.
It's very, very interesting. So, you know, I feel, Mark, you started at the beginning by saying not much has changed even though we're past November 6th, the election is over, at least for 12 months until the 2016 presidential election begins.
Yes.
But you started by saying not much has changed, not much is going to change. Give us a little hope. What's the way out?
Well, we, as members of the public, and specifically at the School for Conflict Analysis Resolution, have a role to play. And a simple one would be to, obviously boycott any warlike imagery within the media. That's very hard to do.
Right.
It's going to keep happening. However, this conflict resolution plan that can be enacted within politics itself will recognize the agency of women and use male allies to enable that. However, it's not going to be, I posed this question to my classmates previously where, do you think that it should be 100% women in the House, the Senate, and the presidency for the next 200 years to make up for 200 years of 100% domination by their male counterparts in politics? But, that was laughed off. That's not going to happen. But I think that what has changed is that there are male allies out there who are willing to discuss these, willing to not even concede certain beliefs, but embrace them and make sure that the public knows that that's a viable option where women have agency. We don't need to pander for them. We don't need to have our ideologies infringed upon them to make a political statement or a political gain from it. So I believe that starting with the Senate for the past election where it's at record levels for female legislators, I think that's a great start. We need to get closer to 50-50, embrace the male allies that we have within the House and the Senate, and hopefully use this issue between women and their agency to bridge the line between both parties.
Right, and I think what's really compelling about your paper is that you lay out this really beautiful case saying that it's not about men versus women or men causing problems for women, but it's these structural inequalities that arise from the very roots of how our society is set up that disproportionately affect women, and because women are marginalized political actors, we don't call into question, well, wait, why is pregnancy a women's issue when clearly it takes two?
Right.
Why is there no male birth control pill? Why is this the realm of women only? And what I love about the way that you've laid this out for us is you've talked about the structural inequalities that are driving these disproportionate outcomes for women. So it's not really a women's issue. This isn't about women taking the power away from men. This is about reshaping the way our society is structured so that we don't have outcomes that disproportionately place a burden on one gender over another, or even set up genders, this dichotomy where it's men versus women and women fighting for agency or women being empowered.
Right.
So I really appreciate you laying out the way the rhetoric has been constructed, the way forward perhaps with changing the way this dynamic has continued to play out. So perhaps 2016 will see some different dynamics.
Hopefully.
Are there any closing thoughts?
No, I think it's very important, as you said, to be critical about this conflict. And it is a conflict. It's an American conflict, and as the world's indispensable nation, as Madeleine Albright had said, this is a world conflict. People are watching. So to transform that stage into something where men and women are politically equal, it sounds absurd to say, but you look at the numbers in the Senate and the House, it's not equal. And that's the way, for all states within the U.S. as well.
With the notable exception of New Hampshire now.
Exactly. That was my next point.
And we'll see how that plays out. We'll see if that critical mass can change the actual structures, or if we're going to continue to see this dichotomous men versus women dynamic.
Right. So looking at the conflict as symptoms, which is where the institutional discrimination is existing, as opposed to, or looking at it as, as causes, not so much as symptoms. So looking at these symptoms, knowing that the institutional discrimination is the cause of it, and getting at it, and making sure it's not an issue in the future.
Well, thank you for your compelling arguments, and we really appreciate you outlining them. So on behalf of the Center for the Study of Gender and Conflict here at SCAR Speaks, we're very grateful for your time, and thank you for your presentation.
Great. Thanks for talking with me. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.